learners and in your learning and your study of all of this makes sense only if it is applied, if you can use it. And I want to illustrate that. In other words, the study of the names, the joint systems, the harness of musculature, the relation of muscles, the action of muscles, the different shapes in some of the bones, their grooves and bumps and depressions and all of this stuff. It's not going to count unless you can begin to apply some of this to drawing from life. So, as we talk about its parts, how it moves, what is happening when all this takes place. I don't want to just focus on the pieces, but I want every now and then to pull the whole thing together and illustrate how the study of this applies to a figure drawing, in this case, or next door to a figure sculpture, or a figure painting. So, let me illustrate that. I'm going to set up a figure from memory. With an armature-like approach, which is my custom, just to get a sense of the plan of this. Here I had a proposal for where the head might be, the disposition of the shoulders, the passage of the construction of the center line that bisects the torso. It takes me from here to here. The location of certain bone points of the pelvis, which, if you're familiar with them, will help you every single time you set up a figure in 2 dimensions, 3 dimensions, doesn't matter. Axis for upper leg, somewhere into here, patella, a plan for the lower leg, an indication of the angle of the foot, a plan for lower leg over here, arm, as a start. Already, I have certain landmarks indicated in this drawing that derive from the skeleton. The reason I'm doing this is I'm trying to merge these 2 things so that when you look at the figure and you're drawing or interpreting a figure 3-dimensionally or 2-dimensionally, because of what you're doing in here, you'll be familiar with what it is you're supposed to be looking for. Because it will help you in setting up your work. There's a word for that. It's called construction. So, let me get past this, and then I'll identify what, it's a Michelangelo's term, bone points. Don Gale's term, Michelangelo used it. He actually indicates bone points when he draws a little line on one of his famous drawings, and he has the letter O on it, which comes from the word for os, O-S, meaning bone. That famous drawing in the back, the Libyan Sibyl, red chalk, owned by the Metropolitan Museum, you know it? Like this, study for the Sistine ceiling. And he's got 2 lines that come off of this bone point of the shoulder, called the acromion process. Actually, it's coming off the distal clavicle on the drawing. Lines are coming up with a little letter O above each one, indicating bone, O, os. Anyhow, in setting this up, let's see, let me just give you some shapes here. And then I'll go back and we'll talk about what some of these are. The point is to illustrate how the study of the details of the structure of the figure feed directly into a drawing in this case. This is a major landmark. I use this all the time because it's there all the time, and it connects to the same place all the time. So if you learn that, you use it. By contrast, if you don't know that it's there, you may not look for it, you may not find it, and you don't use it. So I'd rather have you know that it's there, look for it, maybe find it on the model, begin to use it in your work. Now, part of putting a drawing together is appraisal of the work. What's going well, what's going poorly? That's part of putting all this together. I don't want to be so clever about identifying all these places and being strong in the theory and being weak in performance. I don't want that. I'd rather be strong in both if I could. But just to know the inventory over here is one thing. To apply it is what we're here for. So, I have to critique this drawing. This head is massive. It's way too big. It looked fine when I was drawing from right about here, but it's way too big. Let me pick out three things. Head is too big. I need to have more information on the pelvis. No hip here at all. And it looks as if the lower leg should be longer. I'm just going to dust that down. You can get chamois in the store, but actually a good place to get chamois is in a auto parts place where they sell them for about a quarter the price. So in putting together a drawing, we want to stop, make an appraisal of how things are going. Head at a smaller size is going to be a lot better. Something for the hip and leg here. And while that was a start, it seemed to me short. And I'm going to back the knee up before shorten it more in this upper leg. And then try to show you how I, even in this primitive and quick drawing, I've tried to integrate some of the information from here. Get that longer. Maybe put it over here somewhere. At the level of the C. Maybe, since I'm drawing this from memory, I can make changes here. Maybe I'll change the position of this. Drop this a little. Flex this leg more. Bring it over. Drawing from memory is a good thing. Allows you to test what you know. And find a new position for this leg. Instead of having them quite the same, let this drop a bit. And let that just slide back there and just resting on something. Now, for bone points, for the reference that I'm using in setting up this drawing that comes from here, let me just tell you what I've got, and then we'll talk about the names. I've got one other thing to fix here, because this line that actually bisects the torso is not quite in the right place to indicate the movement that I've got in this figure, so I want to shift this over. It's not in the center. It should be in the center. It's called the center line. So lighten up this one. I can get this figure to twist a little bit more if I do this. Pelvis is moving that way. Courtesy of these bone points, shoulders going this way. Courtesy of these bone points is where it's seated. And let me just quickly go through and share some of the agenda coming directly from the skeleton that's fed directly into this drawing. And then we'll talk about some of the names. Cranium, the whole skull, mandible, mastoid process, suprasternal notch. Don't bother about writing these down. I just want you to look up here. suprasternal notch, sternum, xiphoid process. These are all bone points. Bone points coming from here. Acromion process. The articulation with the clavicle, rib cage, anterior superior iliac spine of pelvis. I'll show you where that is. Coming down to this cross contour, anterior inferior iliac spine of pelvis, pubic bone, trochanter, patella, tuberosity of tibia, distal tibia, fibula, bones of the foot, tarsal bones, olecranon process. Process is a fancy word for bump. Okay? Process. Don't be too upset about all that, but that's what I'm trying to do is to show you that it's not just academic learning, but it's applied. Because in setting up a drawing like this, I'm using very specific references that are to be found on the skeleton. Let me set up another one. Let's do a standing. Back view. There's already a couple of bone points on here because the way in which this is constructed is bilateral. So when you're drawing, you're not just thinking, even in a standing figure, you're not just thinking this way, but you're seeking to relate elements side to side if indeed the construction is bilateral. Bilateral means two-sided. So let's see if I can do that. Drawing from memory with the objective of getting the whole figure on this page with some movement, hopefully. And in abbreviated form, because it's flawed, I don't want a lot of detail on there too soon. I want to make changes in the proportions or the action. In terms of the movement, you see how important this segment is? We'll get to that, but I've found, just to jump all the way to November for a minute, if the torso doesn't move, if you're analyzing the torso and it's coming out too stiff, it's all over. The torso is designed to move. That is the relation of rib cage to pelvis. And in this back view, I have something for an approximation of the size and distance location for head and neck. Granted, it's very abbreviated. It doesn't look much like a head. It's the location for this head. And the shoulder lobe, this high, this for rib cage, this for lumbar spine, base of spine, pitch of pelvis. Here's another bilateral element of construction, right there. And left leg pulled back here. And as the right leg is pulled forward, it pulls the pelvis down. That happens. I'm thinking of Degas' wonderful bronze piece of with the ribbon, you know, in the ballet outfit. The Little Dancer of 14 Years, you know it. It casts all over the place. The Met has one in New York. So let's make a figure out of this, and then talk about the bone points, and then the nomenclature. along on this axis. Again, the reason I'm doing this is that I'd rather start this course off with your first impression that it's about the overview and not so much about its details. Because we'll be talking about the details, to my mind, they're only going to be useful insofar as you can apply them. So that's what I'm trying to illustrate. Good. Very abbreviated. And as this leg is pulled forward, it lowers the pelvis. So there should be this sort of thinking all the way through here, comparing one side to the other. Compare is a key word in life drawing. Without comparisons, you don't wind up with sets of relationships. One should compare everlastingly parts of each other, and then when you get to the modeling, the tones, what some people used to call shading, it's comparison of those tones. How much attention have I given to the arms here? Not much. Why? They could be in 100,000 different positions without impacting these relationships very much. Let me surprise you by doing, what do you expect me to do with the position of those arms? How many different possibilities? Many. Maybe we'll adduct that one and tuck the other one. As if it's pulled in this way, on the front side of the figure. Don't be bashful about drawing from imagination, drawing from memory. It's a good thing to do, because what are my sources for this drawing? I don't have a model out here. It's coming from my head, what I know, some experience, maybe the memory of a piece that I admire, I don't know. Maybe there's a Degas, perhaps, with some changes to it. Anyhow, I want to connect now to the source, which is this, structurally, for what I have here, and get a little more specific. I think I'll back this up and try to share the light. And do that. Let's illuminate the skeleton now because we want to switch over. When I drew this line, it's fun, obviously, and it has 4 curves. We'll go back to some of the names here in a minute. Spine comes from spina. When I drew this line, I was connecting the acromion process. A little roof over your shoulder, one side to the other side. When I drew this line, I was acknowledging the bilateral construction of the iliac crest of the pelvis. Pelvis is a Latin word for something that I have in a box over here that I'll show you in a minute. This is an axial line that comes down that acknowledges right here the articulation of and the bone points of the femur with the tibia, which is the large weight-supporting bone of the lower leg. This also is pelvis. This is a little line that indicates the bone point of pelvis. That's here. You see it launching forward in this view. That's why I have it on this angle. It structures this whole area. The base of the spine, this little shape, the sacrum, which I indicated as part of this line going across here. It's just a connection that you can read on the figure because at this point, which is the posterior superior iliac spine, we'll translate that in a little while, don't worry about it. This little idiosyncratic little bump here that I have in my drawing actually reflects the presence of the most prominent cervical vertebra, the last one, which is C7. You count them down, cervical 7. Cervical 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7. This one is T1. We switch to thoracic. Number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 12. And you have 5 lumbar. They get heavier, more dense, less movement. The whole figure gets heavier as you got down below for weight-bearing responsibility. Don't you see? Make a comparison of how delicate and light the shoulder girdle is to how massive and how much more heavy the pelvis is, all of which we'll talk about later on. This design for movement and this design for less movement, more weight-bearing responsibility. So as a consequence, everything's heavier down below. Other bone points that I could have indicated here, but I didn't, is the chromion process as part of scapula. This is part of scapula. And when I put this on, I gave you some indication of the articulation, that is the capacity for movement as one zone meets another, for the relation of the hand to the forearm. I mean, you can pretty much forecast what that arm is doing even while only seeing these directions. It's not much of an arm yet, it's a stick. We need to open that door and get some more air moving in here. This is airless in here. And I don't mind the fan going on. I'll just talk over the fan if you want to turn that on low. Nomenclature. Names. Let's see. I'm going to show you a little show and tell in this clock. You have to take yourself back to the late Middle Ages, when the study of this essentially commenced. For almost 1,500 years, there was one authority in anatomy. He, for part of his life, worked in Rome at the Colosseum, patching up gladiators. And his name was Galen. He was born in what is now Western Turkey, in Pergamon. But he based his anatomical research on quadrupeds, animals, not humans. And so there came a time when in fine art and in the culture it was sanctioned that you could actually study the construction of the human figure and learn something about it and be more authoritative in your presentation of it aesthetically. Painters wanted to have their work convincing, sculptors the same, they got commissions, they didn't want a weak performance. So the study of this was fueled. In studying all of this, principally for the first time, they had to come up with names for things. How do you do that? If you're the first one, and there's no basic record for anything before that, and you're going after this for the first time, I'll tell you what happened. If it looked like something, it got that name. It was about resemblance. So, no, we won't be filleting anybody in here, or as somebody thought I was saying, filleting anybody in this class. But I brought this in. This is a bayonet from a fairly early period. I don't have this exactly identified, but it does, or it did, let me put it that way in past tense, it did seem to represent a shape that yielded a name for a bone on the torso, such that its Latin name, sternum gladiolus, means sword, was applied to this shape to include a handle. A handle with a sword, a little prominence down here. I'm so lucky that the specimen I had is a little knob down here, which is analogous to this xiphoid process. Xiphos means sword in Greek, and sternum gladiolus means sword in Latin. It looked like a sword, it got the name, it stuck, that's what it's called. This part of it looked enough like a handle. Its name, manubrium, M-A-N-U-B-R-I-U-M, manus, hand, manipulate. This is all, it's called etymology, the study of words, the derivation of words. I know it's hot, I know it's your lunchtime, I know it's afternoon, I know it's the first week, I don't care. This is the way it is. We'll be repeating this, and my thought is, seeing this will help you remember some of this stuff. You know what this is called in Greek? Cranion. A helmet. Cranium. All of this. Dense for protection of its contents. In mummification, the Egyptians would perforate, go through the nose in order to drain out the contents of the cranium, perforate the nose, and sort of scramble its contents, and then drain the whole business out. But all of this kept very much intact for the afterlife in their culture and their religion. We just empty this out and make reference to certain things. Any guesses? This is a basin. Thought I heard it. Pelvis. P-E-L-V-I-S in Latin means basin. Here it is. Here's the shape. And here's the true pelvis. This is the true and complete shape. And this sometimes referred to as the false one because it's incomplete. For good reason. But in any event, basin, pelvis meaning basin. There are some draftsmen that draw this shape when they're working out the pelvis. I'm sure you've seen drawing books to do that. Scapane or scapula is a Latin word for shovel. Well, they have found on Neolithic sites where early communities were actually farming, planting, harvesting, domesticating animals. They found primitive tools made out of bone attached to some sort of a staff. It's called hafting. You attach something to something else by sinew, by tendon, probably from an animal. They found animal quadrupedal scapulae, shovels, on Neolithic sites. For us, it may help to remember its shape. It looks like a digging tool. You look at an animal scapula, doesn't it look like a digging tool? Couldn't you picture that you could actually take this piece and find some sort of a heavy enough stick that has a slight bend to it and tie the tough sinew tendon from a kill around that to this piece of bone and use it as a farm tool? Perfect. Scapula, digging tool, shovel. What? Any ideas? Just in your way. Mallet. In Latin, malleolus. Do you know what your ankles are really called? Malleoli. From mallet. It comes down and appears to stick out one side and stick out the other side. It's not quite the way it works, but it looks sufficiently enough like this to early anatomists to use this, the name for this, or the name for that. Here's one. This is interesting. A key, in Latin, claviculus. Key. And I'm thinking over here, well, it has this articular surface, it has a little flat place out here, it comes out. There's some debate about the origin of the name of the clavicle, because it can come from the word for key, but it also is used in reference to the shape of the entrance of Roman forts. We won't go into that today, but it has its derivation from a Latin meaning, which could come from key. We got this at a tag sale near Florence. Tag sales in Europe are great because they got stuff that goes back a few more 100 years than around here. Claviculus. This is a little far-fetched, but my etymology book says this is the way it is. It's what's left of a vine that I had. And the Anglo-Saxon word for vine is rebe, R-E-B-E, rib, as in a tangle of all of these shapes curling around. If you've ever drawn a rib cage, you realize how tangled you can get here. You wonder whether you're drawing a negative space or whether you're drawing ribs. I've fallen into that trap how many times. Rebe, vine. Some things I don't have, which I'll go over. Mandible, from mandere, to chew. It's a Latin verb. Sternum, this is the suprasternal notch, what we talked about. Spina, form. There's a church called the Church of the Spina in Pisa that claims to have a thorn from the crown of thorns. The crown of thorns. Chiesa della Spina in Pisa, right on the Arno River. Well, spina comes spine, our word spine, and spina meaning thorn. So to the early anatomists, it was thorny enough looking to obtain that particular name. Vine, radius, for what it does. As I say, I don't want to move this around here too much, but not until I fix this articulation. Carpus means wrist. Metacarpal. Meta is a Greek word meaning beyond, as in metaphysics or metacarpal. It's just simple arrangement. Carpus means wrist. There's 8 small bones here. These bones are beyond that one, so they're called metacarpal, because meta means beyond. And phalanges comes from Greek meaning phalanx, of soldiers, a line of soldiers. Phalanges, phalanx. Vertebra, vertebra, Latin, to turn. Basin, trochanter. You should have a wheel here with a little hub in it, because that's what trochanter means. Trochanoi in Greek means the hub of a wheel. If you extend and flex your leg on the pelvis, you'll be flexing the leg on the pelvis, this is extending the leg on the pelvis, this is the hub of a wheel, and the leg is a spoke. Trochanter. These 2 are really interesting. There's 3 that I want to show you, and then we'll stop just a bit early. Patella, a little plate. It's a little dish, a little plate. Patella is missing his. I have to see if I can't reconstruct that. But it forms a sort of a covering over a flexed leg so that the interface of the joint can't be as easily damaged, and it harnesses all the straps of your quadricep muscle. Its shape looked enough like a little plate to gain the name patella. little plate. And two more. I know you won't believe me on this one, but well, I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. The tibia, which is the large, rather hollow, in this desiccated state, bone of the lower leg. Tibia means flute. Why do you suppose that is the case? What would you need to make a flute? Hollow, perforated, get clever enough, make a few holes here and there, play the thing. Well, there was a painting at the Metropolitan Museum by Caravaggio called The Musician. There was a bone flute sitting in the front of that painting, and it's a tibia from a quadruped. The name of this bone comes from the fact that they used to play these. I don't think human ones, I think quadrupedal ones. Its partner in the lower leg is the fibula. Do you know what a fibula is? In Latin. Look it up in a Latin text. A fibula is a pin. Well, sort of like this. You see it? It has a larger member and it has a smaller one that hooks to it. And when those early anatomists got to this stage of naming these things, just for the sake of clarity, these elements on the figure, they saw that there was a large element, that's tibia, there was a lesser one, that shall be called fibula, because it resembled enough the larger and smaller elements of a pin. The name for pin was fibula, on it goes. There are obviously many more, but it's not as complex as you think. I just have a lot of all sorts of different things in here. Bones, massive for support. You know how dense and magnificent this is. I mean, just the study of bones. Has anyone ever seen that picture of Henry Moore, the sculptor, sitting, before he died, sitting in front of all these boxes of bones, examining these things and looking at their most magnificent shapes? All of these shapes and ridges and grooves and smooth places and hollow places are all for a purpose. I mean, as you extend your arm, the knobbiness of your elbow disappears. How is that possible? Doesn't stick out. Well, it goes into a groove in here. And likewise, that will happen here. Why would some part be smooth and other parts be rough? Smooth for articulation, where it wants to move. Rough in certain places for points of attachment for muscle groups. Ridges and valleys, such as this, to guide tendons and muscles in certain directions. Otherwise, they have to be harnessed in by straps. You have a set of straps. It'll be interesting, as we get to go to the Yale Department of Anatomy, you'll see, but all these straps, these tendons we'll talk about, but they have to be somehow or other harnessed in and guided into position. One method is by having grooves, and another method is by having actually a strap, sort of similar to this, called a retinaculum, that holds all these tendons in place and acts as a pulley. Well, let me finish up, because it's really hot, there's no air, and conditions are tough. Let me go back to this, just for a couple of minutes, and leave you with one last thought here. All of that, for our purposes, all of that which you can study here. I just opened up the rhomboid major muscle. Well, I got lucky. I happen to know where that one is. It's up here. But don't you see there's a priority here in this class and in the class that follows, and if you're working this academy, the priority is the application of this stuff, this information, to your figurative work in drawing, sculpture, painting, whatever it is. This study is meant to support this enterprise. Don't forget that as we get involved with the details of the elements of construction. Remember I said that on day one, because we get really involved with this little saddle-shaped bone in here that allows for an opposable thumb. It's not just about that, it's about the hand